what we want to really show you today is that we know there's plenty of folks doing the entire work process, from upload, ingest, editing, finishing, all entirely in an edit-on-demand environment, and then delivering from the edit-on-demand environment. But we also know that a lot of people have, if I jump to the next slide, have on-premise systems today, and a lot of capability on-prem. But they're using those either to, and you're probably using those to deliver content today and deliver work today. And perhaps you're at the maximum amount of capability you have, and you want to flexibly add on top of that, and provision on top of what you already have. Additionally, you might actually want to use what you already have for different types of workflows now. So we know that floor space in a lot of facilities is more and more expensive than it's ever been, and actually getting people into a room is what we want to start being able to do again, since how the last few years have gone. But we want to use those times and those moments to do really important work, and that might be that some of the finishing pieces, so some of the color grading, some of the whether it's a basslight or a resolve, or maybe some of your audio workflows for some of your Pro Tools workflows, maybe to do some of your finishing in a room that has Dolby Atmos, and really use that floor space for some of those workloads and some of those times when you need that kind of high-end monitoring and you need people in a room together to do that final review piece. And actually for a lot of the offline piece, and as people have experienced over the last year, a lot of that can be done remotely. And the great thing about Edit on Demand is you can spin up that and provision that in a completely agile, flexible way as your productions scale. So as your productions kind of get larger, you can add more to it, but also as they get smaller, you can also size down productions as you go as well. So our workflow that we're going to show today is going to be talking about how do we kind of connect what maybe we have going on the on-prem environment with what we have going on up in the Edit on Demand cloud environment as well. So as you can maybe see from my background, I'm based in the Netherlands, and I'm going to be kind of playing the role today of the on-prem environment. So everything you see on my computer when I'm sharing is local to me. So it'll be a local media composer with local media, and then I'm going to be uploading some content into the cloud, and we'll talk through the workflow in a little while. But before we can do any of that, and before we can then have Corey come in and connect into the cloud editor and show you all of the great things we can do connecting to the Edit on Demand environment, we need to first deploy the Edit on Demand environment. So once I've got my on-prem system set up, the next thing I probably want to do is actually then set up the Edit on Demand environment. So we're going to do that now, and really what we're doing is talking about automating the whole provisioning of an entire offline capability and facility up in the cloud. So that includes all of the media composer seats, includes all of the Nexus shared storage to have collaborative workflows up in the cloud, up in Edit on Demand, and also the other components, the file transfer tools, which Ray already mentioned, and the Teradici components to be able to remote into those media composers. All of that happens with just a few clicks. And in fact, to show you how simple it is, rather than show you some slides, I'm just going to jump out of the slides for a moment. And this is my media composer. We're going to come back to this in a little while, but I'm just going to go and jump over to my Avid account. And so anyone that has an Avid product may be familiar with the My Avid account. You can go and register software, and you'll go and register. Let me just log back in. I think it's timed me out. So I'm just logging back in, but you can go and register a code, right? You can redeem a code, and you can do that today with your media composer, or with maybe your Pro Tools or your other Avid software that you have. This is exactly the same for Edit on Demand. So you would get a code that includes all of the credits that you're going to use. So you would populate your code in there and register the product. I've already done that today. So I already redeemed the code this morning. And so if I go to view my products, I'll see the credits that I have to use to deploy my Edit on Demand system. So I'll show you how simple and easy it is to go from nothing to a fully provisioned editorial system running in Edit on Demand. So you can see I've got my Edit on Demand credits here. I actually have in my particular setup here, I have a mix of credits. So Ray mentioned that we can provision either weekly or monthly. I have some weekly credits. I also have some monthly credits. We're going to talk about, I'm going to show you and talk about using some of the weekly credits. So if I want to use some of these credits, you can see I've got my base subscriptions. These are the core of the systems. These are the things that include all of the components which we mentioned. And then effectively you're adding seats and storage to that. So as you need more editors or as you need more storage for your media, you can add additional credits. So let's go and use my credits. So right now there's nothing deployed in the cloud. I'm just going through the process of getting everything ready to go and deploy it. Firstly, you'll see to create a subscription, you'll choose the region, and I have one particular region in my particular system here. We're actually today for the demo we're going to connect to a US system, but my personal subscription has access to a West Europe region. So this is an Amsterdam system. We're going to actually spin something up, or we're going to use something that's spun up in the East US data center. And Corey will talk to you a little bit later about where all the different data centers are. And I can choose, you can see the available credits. I can choose whether I want to do monthly or weekly. So I'm going to choose weekly, and we're going to just use some of our weekly credits that we have available to us. I can choose a start date for when I want a subscription to start, so when I want the environment to spin up. I can choose today, obviously, or I can choose something ahead of time, or in the future, I suppose. So I could choose something later next week or maybe next month, when I want the system to kind of begin. So you can prep a system before you deploy. You don't have to kind of wait to the day and then kind of try and deploy everything in one go. You could prep all of this ahead of time. I can see that I have my standard 1 week as my first week with no seats and no storage. So let's go and add a few extra weeks. So you can see I have 4 credits to use. I've used 1 for the first week. Let's go and use a second base credit for the second week, and then a 3rd credit for the 3rd week. I'm going to leave the 4th week for the moment. And then I'm going to add my seats. And I have, in this particular system, I have availability of what we call standard seats. You can see here, if you look at some of the monthly credits I also have what we call advanced seats. So there's a standard and an advanced media composer type. And we'll talk a little bit more about those later. Effectively, there's a slight difference in the performance, but we know for a lot of workflows, standard is great for most workflows, and advanced is also great for some of those higher end workflows where you really need some extra horsepower there as well. So if I want to go and add the standard seat, I can add 1 for the first week, 1 for the second week, 1 for the 3rd week for the moment. So we've got 1 seat every week. And then for our storage, we can maybe start with 5 terabytes. And then in the second week, we know there's going to be a whole bunch of extra media coming in. So we're probably going to want maybe 10 terabytes. And then maybe that's enough for our project. Or you might say, actually, do you know what? We need just an extra terabyte at the end. So we could go and do 11 terabytes. And the great thing about Edit on Demand is the way you provision on the storage side, we can go anywhere from 1 terabyte to 200 terabytes in a single subscription. And you can go in any combination. So it's not like buying normal pieces of shared storage where you're buying big chunks of storage every time. You can be really specific and say, this week I need 11 terabytes, not 60, not 30. You can do it in per terabyte chunks. You get a lot of flexibility to scale, not just up, but also down as well. So you could scale this back down as the production maybe scales down at the end. We could do the same with seats as well. So maybe we're going to add a second seat for week 2, and we'll maybe need a second editor in for week 3. And I'm going to go and click next. So I've got my kind of core system set up here, ready to go. We can choose a media composer version. Typically we have 2 versions in play at any one time, and this version will continue for the entirety of your subscription. So I could choose maybe the latest version, or maybe I want a version which is maybe got a few more patch releases in it and something a little bit more stable. So I can even pick stability, or I can pick kind of latest and greatest bleeding edge functionality and features as well. And then I'm going to give my system a name, and we'll call this Danny Webinar for today. Click next. And at this point, I still haven't deployed. So all I have to do now is click accept. And then when I click create subscription, it will go off and deploy the system for me in a completely automated fashion. So that's all I have to do as a user to get I've now got several seats of Media Composer up and running and a bunch of shared storage all up and running in an automated fashion. So I'll get an email back in a few hours and say, hey, the system's ready for you to use. And then once it's available for me to use, I'm just going to jump over here and show you, as we say in the UK, here's one I made earlier. I'm going to show you a system that we have already available up and running. So this is an existing subscription. One thing to note is that you can see I can update a subscription as well. So once I've deployed, if I needed another seat at any point or some more storage, at any time I could go in there and add that additional seat, add that additional storage whenever I needed it. So you're not kind of fixed into what you deployed the first time. You can always go and extend things out as your production scales and grows. But the great thing is, all the credits that I used, I know exactly what I'm spending. So as Ray said, you're not going to get like a bill at the end of the month from Avid that says, hey, you've overused all of this stuff and here's a big, huge bill. You're going to buy all the credits you need at first, and then you can spend them as you go, and you know exactly what you're spending and exactly what you're using before you do it. So you're deploying what you need when you need it. So this is my already available system. I'm going to jump in and look at the portal for that system. So this is the edit on demand portal, and this is where I can do some of the management. So once it's spun up, all I have to do now as a user is maybe have a look at what I've got on the system. So this particular system has 3 terabytes. It shows me how much I've actually used of the existing amount of storage, and also the download egress as well. We'll talk a little bit about this. So a terabyte is included as default, as standard. But what we find is that's great for most workflows, particularly the on-prem to cloud workflows, where really the thing that we're downloading from the cloud every time is probably things like bins and projects, and then we're doing the relink to the high-res media maybe on-premise. If I go to users, this is where I can create my users. And you can see we've got a bunch of users in the system. I can go make a new user here. I could add several in one go if I wanted to. So maybe we wanted to go and add Ray, who's maybe going to do the demo later as well. And then we'll add Corey as well into our system in this particular setup as well. And then I could hit submit, and then that would actually go and deploy those users across the entire system. So that's everywhere into the Nexus, into the Teradici components, into the virtual machines, into the media composers. So really little, really light, let me just sign back in, really light touch from a user perspective. You're not having to, or an admin perspective, you're not having to go and manage all of that stuff manually. You don't have to have big engineering teams. You can really do this in a really simple user interface and get a system built up with people accessing it really quickly. You can then obviously share out the details to your different users that access it. If you don't want someone to access it anymore, you can either reset their password and it will just remove their password for them, or you can delete a user altogether as well, and then they're gone from the system. So if you kind of want to give someone some timed access, give them the access, and then you can wipe them away, and then they won't be able to carry on accessing the system after the fact. If I go to edit seats, you can also see this is a newer feature actually in the edit on demand portal, where what we can see is the systems which are available, of the media composers which are available in this particular subscription. So they can see they're all off at the moment in this one. If they were on, I could turn them off from here as well. So if you wanted to kind of stop a media composer, you could do that from here rather than having to log into the media composer. Also, you can reset your VMs, your virtual machines as well. So if you, for instance, had some sort of issue and you couldn't get in there, you could just do a reset from here and it would kind of do a full reboot of the machine nice and cleanly for you from this user interface, which is great. And then obviously the system details, which you can then share out to your users with their username and password to either access through the Teradici client to access the media composers, or the file transfer tools, and where they could go in and do a manual upload. So you could actually go in, upload manually from your local system into the right directories inside your Nexus in the cloud. And that's just for a normal web page, which we're not actually going to look at today. We're going to look at a slightly more automated workflow and a slightly more integrated workflow. So actually on that note, I'll reshare my presentation and we'll talk about what we're going to show today. So once we've got our system built up, like we already have, the next thing to do is talk about the workflow we're going to show today. So on my on-prem system, I'm going to take in some of the raw original rushes, some of the media coming off of a camera or from the field. And we're going to upload that we're going to do some transcodes first into an editing format, into like DNX HRLB, for instance. And then we're going to upload our transcoded material to the cloud with a bin or a project. We could do the full project. In this case, I'm going to show you just moving a bin up there. And then we're going to have our editors remote in and use the Teradici connection to connect into the remote cloud media composers and do the editing. So that's why Corey's going to come in and show us how we can edit from the cloud as well. And then we're going to download our project and our bin files back to our on-prem system, where then we could do a relink workflow and, you know, push out to different finishing and delivery workflows. We mentioned, you know, going to our Pro Tools, for instance, maybe for our Dolby Atmos mix that we want to go and do. So with that, I'm going to jump back out and actually now start showing you the workflow. So let's go into my media composer here. And I've already been prepping a project earlier today, and Corey and I have been sort of, you know, already back and forth working on a project that has, you know, a bunch of different media in it and a bunch of different shots. It's a short sequence which we're building with lots of drone materials. So there's lots of stuff, you know, high in the sky, shooting lots of different locations. And actually, we had some additional media come in earlier today, which we want to then push up to Corey and send it up to the cloud. Like I said, we could do this manually, or actually we're going to do something slightly more integrated where we have a watch folder workflow, really simple, where I have folders on my local system that are connected to folders up in the, in the edit on demand system. And all I have to do is drop stuff in there and it will automatically push that up to the cloud. And then Corey can also drop stuff into folders on her side and it'll automatically come back down into the on-prem system as well. So I've got a bunch of media here, which I've linked to. So all I did to do this was, for anyone that's maybe not super familiar with Media Composer, I just went in through the source browser and I linked to that media, and I could, you know, get access to the original media. And this stuff's like 4K media, not particularly, don't really need to push this up to Corey to edit from. Corey just needs some, you know, material, some transcoded versions to be able to do the editing. And then we're going to use the originals maybe later to do all of the finishing and kind of get back to the original high res at a later stage. So I've just done some transcodes for Corey here. And again, to do the transcode, quite simply, all I did, right click, consolidate transcode on the media. And it's just a normal Media Composer transcode. And I think just to remind everyone, I know it gets pretty confusing when we're in Zoom. I'm sat at home in the Netherlands and I am using all local media right now. This is my local Media Composer. This is not a cloud Media Composer yet. We're going to get there. We're going to send this stuff up to the cloud. So great, I've done my prep. I've got a bunch of media. So the first thing I'm going to do is maybe chuck the bin to Corey. And so what you can see here, if I just jump back and forth, you can see on the left-hand side, I have a bunch of folders which I have ready to send up to Corey they're integrated into the cloud. So I've got this upload to Corey, and that's actually uploading, not directly to Corey, but actually uploading to the edit on demand system, which Corey's then going to connect into a remote Media Composer with. So I'm going to jump into my project, and you can see I have my bin here. And quite simply, all I'm going to do is copy my bin, just the mining shots for Corey, which I just brought in. Let's copy that. And I'm just going to copy and paste that just into the hot folder here, and that will then start uploading that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, if I jump back to my Media Composer and we go to our media here and I go and reveal the file, I'm going to take some of these shots here and actually push up the media, the transcoded media here as well. So I'm just going to copy these out, and I'm also going to then push that up and paste that into the hot folder for Corey. So that will start now uploading to Corey. And so on that note, it's probably a good chance, Corey, maybe to bring you into the call and talk a little bit about, actually, before we jump to, just about where both you and I are. So I'm just going to bring up my presentation quickly before I hand the screen share to you.
Okay.
And just talk very briefly about the fact that we are both sat in different locations today, right? So you can see we tried our best to do this over Zoom. You can see I'm sat at home in the Netherlands. And Corey's sat in her home office just outside of Boston. And actually, I've been working with local media, but I just uploaded that content, and it's going from me in Amsterdam here all the way to our data center in the East US, which is where Corey's then going to connect into and actually edit from that East US data center. So Corey, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll do a screen share from you.
All right, I'm going to take the share right now. And so the first thing I'm going to do is, let's look at the system that I'm logging into. And as Danny mentioned, I am at home. I'm on my my Mac laptop at home, and I want to do some editing. So I'm going to connect into the East US system that we have set up. I use my just my login here, and we'll see I'm connecting into the system, but when I get to the next stage, I can choose which editing client. You know, Danny showed this to you when he was setting things up, that you have a choice between If the system is multiple clients, and it typically does, because you're working in a shared environment, and we're trying to replicate this collaborative workflow, but in the cloud. So you're going to have multiple clients. I have a choice between this advanced client here and a standard client. You can see that the advanced client is stopped. So that just means that the VM is shut down. If I click on it and log in, it'll spin up for me, and I can use the advanced client if I need that horsepower. And this client here, the standard client, is ready. So I can connect to that when I'm ready to start using it. But let's take a second to talk a little bit more about the data centers and where can we do this workflow. We have, as Danny mentioned, we have the data center down here in the East US is the one that our current system at working on is today. You'll see we have 56 regions worldwide, and it's available in 140 different countries. So you have a lot, obviously, in Europe and the Americas, but literally all over the world, there are data centers that would enable you to set up systems. The ones that Avid on Demand is currently available are in 8 of the regions here that you can see. And in terms of setting up the systems, and when you're working in the cloud, a lot of the questions that come up are about bandwidth. There's sort of 2 sides to that. There's the bandwidth that you need, and then latency. How many hops does it take to get from where you are on your network to where the system is? So you're looking at a latency of less than 60 milliseconds. And from a bandwidth perspective, you really want to have greater than around 20 millibits per second or megabytes, sorry, per screen. So what I mean by that is when you're doing these workflows, the strain is really all about presenting a window. That's what's happening here. Remember that the media is all up in the cloud. That's not something that you have to worry about. You're working on a system that's just happens to be in the cloud. It's not in a physical office, it's in the cloud. So you're not putting any strain on your system in terms of moving media around. The strain is really on presenting a window to you. So that's the bandwidth that you're looking for. That's what you're concerned about when you want bandwidth. If you don't have as much bandwidth, you can just make your window smaller in terms of the player inside of Media Composer. So just something to think about in terms of different concepts for what you need to be able to connect. So speaking of connect, let's actually connect into my client here. And as this spins up, we will get into Media Composer. It's already up and running, and we'll see the timeline. So basically, when I logged out of it, this is the state it was in. I didn't quit out because I wanted to jump back into it. So here is my Media Composer up in the sky. And this is the project that Danny mentioned that I'm working on. And again, I'm up in the cloud. So this system is running in Edit on Demand. The Nexus is running it in Edit on Demand. And I can just work with this as I would be working in any other situation. So Danny mentioned that he has some additional clips and media that he is sending to me. So I can pop here on the Finder level, and let's take a look at, not the Client Manager, we'll talk about that later. Look at some of the clips from Danny, and there they are. So I have the bin from Danny that I need to copy over to my project, and here's my project. And I'm just gonna copy this over into my local project here. And then I need to move the media over into the right directory so that Media Composer knows where it is, okay? So Media Composer does a quick scan. I'm gonna refresh my project, and there's my bin from Danny. Thank you, Danny. And let's take a look at what we have here. So we have some trees, we have some nice sky shots. So we can just do some simple editing here. I'll cut some of this in here, and then, basically I'm just working as if I were working in Media Composer. I'm trimming. I can do some effects work if I want to get to that point. Let's cut these trees in. That looks nice. And again, this is just me doing the same thing I would be doing inside the facility, but I'm doing it on the cloud. There's really no difference to the user in terms of what it feels like to be working on through this Teradici client versus, working in person on a system. So let's let me wow you with my color correction skills here. Just to see that you can do anything that I would be doing in a real live situation. Probably not making these pink, but you get the point. That I basically am just working and editing here in the cloud. And it's the same Media Composer that you're working with on-prem, but you happen to be in the cloud. I like to think of it as a little post house in the sky. I have the same bin lock icons. I'm literally sharing with other folks. So now that I've done my amazing color correction here, let's save our project. Okay, and now I just need to get the metadata back to Danny. So I basically just need to send my project, my updated project, back to Danny. So I will copy this and paste it over in my to Danny hot folder, which does all the work for me. I just have to put it in the right place and copy that over. And so I mentioned that, this really is a little post house in the sky. And what I mean by that is, inside a facility, in the on-premise world, Danny and I might be down the hall from each other. I might be in Edit Bay 1 and Danny's in Edit Bay 2, and I'm either, rolling out the door and saying, hey, Danny, the bin's ready, or whatever. But in this scenario, we just happen to be across the world instead of down the hall from each other. And it's the same exact experience. I have my Nexus that's mounted here. If Danny weren't working on-prem and he were working in the cloud, or any of the other clients that were working in the cloud, they would have the same Nexus Client Manager available. And I can utilize my workspaces here. So I can go into the Nexus Administration Console, and I can log in and talk at the same time. But I can make changes to workspaces. That would, if I need more drive space, Danny's set up things for me, the workspaces for me, but I then have control over adjusting workspace sizes the same way you would with an on-premise system. So I have my dashboard for the Nexus console here, and exactly the same as you would have for an on-prem system, even though it's in the cloud. I can look at my workspaces here, and here's my projects workspace. Again, if I need to adjust the size of the workspace, I can do that in a millisecond. And everyone else that's working on this same cloud system, regardless of where they are, is that storage is immediately available to them. So there's really no difference. And I love that. It really is a little post house in the sky, where you, instead of having all your edit bays inside the facility in their little offices, you're in your little offices around the world, but you have the exact same workflow. I mean, when we come back into Media Composer here, I mentioned that I still have my bin lock icons. So if I want to set this up to make it available, I can see who was using it last. I can set this to make it available. I had the green lock icon, which meant I had write access to it, but I can set it to blue, which means that if someone else that's working on the same project wants to pull that open, whether they're, no matter where they are, they can do that. So it's really the exact same workflow that you would find in an on-prem environment. Okay, I think that is it for me. If we are, whenever Danny's ready, he can take things back.
All right, I'll grab the screen share. Thank you, Corey. Mm-hmm. So we're back on the on-prem systems. We're back in the Netherlands now from the cloud hosted ECUS system. So we're back on my local machine here, and actually you can see I have this download from Corey folder. This ties into the folder which Corey just dropped the project into on her side. And you can see there's Corey's updated project for me to take. So I could just work out of this folder, but I'm just going to copy it into somewhere local where I want to keep it. Maybe I want to make sure I keep a version of this in a certain location. So I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to put it into my Corey updates folder here in my projects. I'll just paste that in. And then if I jump back into my Media Composer, let's come back to Media Composer here, and I'll just browse for that location. So we go to our Corey updates, and then guess what? There you go. There's our updated project from Corey. So now I'm going to open my project. And we'll be able to see we've got our update project, including the bin, obviously, I sent last time to Corey, but we should also be able to see our updated timeline. So we see we've got a few different timelines here that Corey's been working on. And I think the top one there was the one with our update. And I can tell it straight away, Corey, because of your lovely blue color grade that you did for me. So from this point, obviously, I'm now connected to my local system. I could actually go and do a relink now. Obviously, Corey was working with the transcoded media, so we made some versions of the media for Corey to edit with. Maybe we want to go and actually do some other finishing, Corey. No matter how much we love your wonderful blue color grade there, Corey. Maybe we want to go and push this out into another color grading system, or maybe we want to do some audio work on it as well. So I could actually go in here and then relink back to the highest quality, the original media, and then relink that timeline back in. And to then go and do whatever I need to do my finishing, my delivery, my distribution workflows from my on-prem system. Or maybe I want some additional editorial work to happen on-prem as well. You could absolutely do that. And you could be pushing back versions of projects or versions of bins in a semi-automated workflow, just like we showed you, in a really easy fashion. So you don't need to use complex web UIs or learn a new tool. It can be really just at that simple, an Explorer or a Finder level, depending on whether you're on the Mac or a PC. Just dragging and dropping, media and bins into the locations and automatically pushing those back and forward in a really seamless and simple fashion. So with that, I think we've given you a good sense of how you can go from an on-prem system to the cloud and back again, and spin up I like what you said, Corey, a post facility in the sky, and just being able to spin it up when you need it.